Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Emailing Administration and Configuration. So thanks for joining us. We'll go through a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So to start, all of your phones and microphones are muted. So if you have any questions, like we said a few minutes ago, feel free to enter those into the chat window. You can ask questions throughout today's webinar. You don't have to wait until the end in order to get those questions answered. A recording of this webinar, in addition to all of our other fabulous webinars, is available on our YouTube channel, or will be available on our YouTube channel. So be sure to watch out for that. In addition to today's webinar and all of our other webinars, you can find those on our calendar. Go to www.clubexpress.com/calendar, and you can see not just the upcoming webinars that we have scheduled, but if you happen to know of any other clubs or associations that are considering new software, we also have webinars for prospective customers that our sales team hosts to provide a general demo or an overview for people who are shopping around for new association management software. So take a peek at our calendar to see what we have coming up next. And like I said, all of our webinars and our tutorials are on our YouTube channel. So search for clubexpress.com and you can find not just the webinars that we host monthly that are free, but also our smaller or shorter tutorials that we have for all of our modules and databases and features. And if you are a current customer using ClubExpress and you have some thoughts about it, we'd love to hear them. You can go to clubexpress.com/reviews and leave us a review on any one of the websites that you see listed. So your reviews help not just us learn how we're helping people and how we can help people better, but it'll also help other potential future customers determine if ClubExpress is going to be a good fit for them. So take a few minutes and leave us a review. And with that being said, we'll jump right into our topic. So in today's webinar, we're going to be talking just about emailing administration and configuration. We have a companion webinar that is going to cover creating emails, emailing styles, emailing templates in 2 weeks. So if you want to get yourself registered for that webinar a little bit early, you can head right over to clubexpress.com/calendar, pre-register for it. You don't have to register in advance, but it gets it on your calendar so you don't forget about it and you'll be ready to go. So in today's session, we're going to talk about just setting up the module and everything that you need to configure it in order to use the module to its full capacity, make sure everyone in your organization that's going to be handling emails has access to it. And we're also going to talk about how you would need to configure and work with the module if you're an organization with subgroups. So first off, let's talk about the difference between blast emails and system emails. Now, a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, I should say, we hosted a webinar talking about our system emails and how those can be configured. So if you're more interested in learning about system emails, go back and watch that webinar. Your system emails are those boilerplate emails that are being sent to members and non-members based on a specific action they're taking on your site. So if they're registering for an event, making a donation, signing up for a volunteering opportunity, things like that. Your blast emails, on the other hand, are going to be your fully customized emails that you're sending to members and non-members for things like newsletters or event announcements. Your blast emails are fully customizable using HTML, using images from your website. You can add links. You can add links to your social media. You can add links to your event calendar. There are a lot of things that you can do within blast emails that you aren't necessarily able to do within system emails. All of your blast emails will come with dozens of different distribution lists. Now, there are some instances where some distribution lists might appear for some organizations and not others, and we're going to talk about that when we take a look at those. Excuse me. We're also going to touch on some of the reusable templates that we have. We are going to go through the templates in detail next week. However, we'll talk about just the fact that they're available and they're only available within blast emails. Your blast emails also have a tracking and resending feature. Now, within system emails, we did recently add the ability to be able to track system emails. You are able to now see who's opened a system email when they got it. So if you're looking to check to see if someone got that payment confirmation and opened it, you have the ability to see that now. Now, in today's demo, what are we going to cover? The first thing that we're going to talk about is setting up access to emailing, making sure that anyone who's going to be sending an email on behalf of your organization has access to it. Then we're going to talk about how we're going to manage the emails that we've sent, even draft emails as well, how we can manage the emails that are currently, that have been sent by our organization, how we can check on the status of emails. We're going to talk about managing our categories and distribution lists, setting up your emailing options. We're also going to take time to talk about emailing with subgroups, without thinking about model 1 or model 2. And we'll talk about those models. We've talked about them a lot in our past webinars. So if you're confused as to what type of subgroup organization you might be and which instances apply to you, be sure to stick around towards the end. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the cleanup options that we have with your email addresses. So if you are a new organization and you've just joined us and you realize that you may not have taken enough time cleaning up your old membership database, we'll talk about some ways that you can do that as well. And as a bonus, we're going to take a look at emailing from within the events module. So there are the same tools available within events that allow you to email attendees, registrants, and things like that. And there are also some additional tools that are available to you when you're emailing from within the events module. So without further ado, let's go ahead and switch gears here. I am currently logged in to our demo site as Martin Smith. Martin Smith is an administrator, so he has access to everything. So the first thing that Martin would want to do is take a little bit off his plate, right? He probably is going to be sending most of the emails, but he doesn't want to send all of them. So right away, first thing that we want to do is set up some additional people who can help us with emailing. The easiest way to do that is to pop into our communications tab, which is where we're going to explore today. We're not going to be leaving it. We're just going to be focusing on communication tools. Now, within our communication tab, we can see that emailing is one of the modules that we have available. On the right-hand side, I'm going to select our configure icon. Our configure icon changes dynamically depending on the tab that you're looking at. You are configuring the options for the individual tab, not necessarily the entire control panel. So if I select the configure option when I'm taking a look at my communications tab, I am seeing options for just the functions in the communications tab. So I'll go ahead and select emailing, and I can change the name of this. I can change the name of the modules so it appears as something different. Maybe I want to call it newsletters. Maybe I want to call it something different that I use internally. For right now, though, I'm really only focused on coordinators. Now, within my coordinators tab, that's where I can add additional people who would have access to just emailing within this tab. Now, if you add someone who is currently a coordinator for several other functions, this might add an additional tab for them in the control panel. So make sure that if you are adding someone to your emailing module as a coordinator, you just let them know that they might see an additional tab or an additional feature available to them. Now, when you give someone coordinator access to emailing, again, that means that they are only going to have access to that specific module. It means they'll be able to go into just emailing. They'll be able to draft and send emails on behalf of the organization. I'll go ahead and close this out. And so now we have a new way that we have to add a coordinator to our emailing module. Now, of course, if you are adding coordinators using the club or association tab and administrators and coordinators, all you would have to do is find your existing coordinator in the list of coordinators or add a new coordinator and select the emailing function. So we see we have Jimmy right here. We just added Jimmy as a coordinator for emailing. Perhaps we also want to give Manny access to emailing as well, but we know that he has access to some other functions. So I can select Manny's functions, and I can go ahead and scroll down to our communications tab, and I can select emailing. I'll go ahead and save that. And now we have our extra hands helping us out with emailing. So now we can move on to actually exploring the module and getting to know it a little bit better. So I'll go back into my communications tab and select emailing. Now, like all of our modules and a lot of our modules and a lot of our databases, when you reach the emailing administration screen for the first time, you're seeing a search feature. Very familiar search feature. If I select search without entering any search criteria, I'm going to see a list of all of the emails that I have either sent or drafted since the start of my site. Now, this is a demo site. We only have a handful of emails that we've sent. You'll see that we have paging controls on the top right-hand corner above our search results. So the more emails that you have, the more pages you're going to see, and you can scroll through those pretty easily. Now, at the top here, when you're searching for emails, you're searching for date or subject. You can also search by category, and we're going to talk about how we set up categories and why you would set those up. And by default, archived emails are not included. Now, in other spaces on your website, you might see that archive option in a couple of places. So that occurs in instances where there are items that we don't allow you to delete, but we know that you want to remove them from your general view. So we allow you to archive them, to remove them from that default initial view, clean up your space a little bit, but like we said, you can't delete those. So right away, when I searched for any of the emails that I've sent, I get my search results in a really familiar looking grid. On the left-hand side, we have our email status. Now, right now, we have two statuses that we're seeing here. And when we're crafting emails, you're going to see some additional statuses that will point out to you. Right now, we see drafts and we see emails that have been sent. So with our draft emails, we can see when the draft was created. And with our sent emails, we see the date and time that the email was sent. Additional status that you might see would be that you have an email that's queued for delivery. So when we get ready to craft and send emails in our next webinar, you'll see that there are emails that are ready to be delivered, but just haven't been sent out just yet. So right when you hit that send button, you may see an additional status that it's queued for immediate delivery. And because we have the ability to send emails at a future date, which will of course be sent, will be covered in our next session. Because we have that ability, you may also see a status that indicates that it's going to be sent in the future, along with that future date and time. Next to that, we have our subject, pretty self-explanatory there. Who the email is from, who the email is to, and this is going back to our distribution list. So most of these look pretty simple. When we start building more complex distribution lists, you'll see that you might have several lines of different groups that are being included. For example, 2 different committees, plus maybe an additional subgroup. Who had created and modified the email, and last, our trusty maintain column. So first things first, when we talk about the options that are available in our maintain column, I want to highlight at the top right-hand corner of the column is this great little legend. When I hover over the legend, it gives me just that, a legend of what each of those icons mean. So if you're ever stuck and you have no idea what some of these icons are for, you can always hover over the icon and see a tooltip that'll tell you exactly what that icon's for, or hover over the list of icons for a quick list of what everything is supposed to do. Now, the first option that we have is the option to edit emails. Now, with emails that have already been sent, so if we take a look at this very top email here, it's been sent already. When I select that edit icon, I can't actually edit the email. Once an email has been sent, I can only recategorize the email or allow it on a view email page. And we're going to talk about that later in our webinar today. So just keep in mind that once you've sent an email, you cannot edit the text. You cannot edit who that email was to. You can't make any changes that aren't just the category change or just that email being displayed on the front end for users. And again, we'll talk about that in just a minute. When you're looking at the pencil icon or the edit icon for a draft email, on the other hand, that will actually let you continue to edit that draft. So we'll see right here, we're getting a little bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, which is just our basic editing screen for blast emails. So we'll go right back. We'll go ahead and save and close. We can always cancel out of this as well. So we've covered our edit icon. Next step would be our emailing results. And in sort of a flipping the switch here, the results icon is not going to be useful for draft emails, just like the edit icon wasn't entirely useful for emails that were already sent. So because the email hasn't been sent, if we click that icon, it just says that's a draft email. However, if we click the results icon for an email that has been sent, we can see some quick email results. They aren't detailed. It's just to give you a very quick idea of how many of these were sent. And if we take a look at some additional emails that we've been sending, we can see some additional results here. Next up, we have our copy icon. Now, the copy icon is going to be really useful if you happen to send a lot of the same emails over and over. We, of course, have templates available that'll allow you to have a little more flexibility in what you're adding to your email. But the copy feature really should be used if you are changing the bare minimum in each of the emails that you send out. Perhaps if you are simply changing, 2 to 3 fields, you won't need to necessarily recraft that email all over again. You can go ahead and create a copy for yourself. Now, when I select copy, I can select it for either drafts or sent emails. So if I select my copy icon, all it does is creates a copy right at the top of my list of emails and automatically saves it as a draft. Nothing else about the email has been changed. The only thing that's been changed is that at the very top in the subject line, the words copy of are inserted. So definitely, it's one of the things that I personally would forget to do and have forgotten to do. So when you create a copy, always just remember to pop right back into that subject line. And of course, we'll talk about that in 2 weeks, but pop back into that subject line and delete that copy of before you send it out. Now is when things get a little bit funky, depending on the status of the email. So you'll see that for drafts, we have fewer icons than we do for emails that have actually been sent out. So let's talk about what we do see. We have this eyeball icon. The eyeball icon is going to open in a new window the email in a preview. So this is going to give you a good idea of what that email is going to look like when it's being sent. And you can see the same thing for sent emails. The only difference is that it's going to include some additional information at the top of when it was sent. With each of our emails, we also have reports that are available. So these reports are going to build on the results that you would have seen within the results window. The reports that you have available, emailing results by status. So with each status that you saw, whether it was a bad email, an invalid format, or a success, you'll see those results by status. You'll see when delivery failed for each recipient, and you can also check that open rate. So you can check to see what the open rate is for your emails. When you have an open rate, when anyone has opened your email, you'll see a percentage that have opened it. So in the case of Larry's Midwest Musings, if we take a look at our results, we only have 2 that were sent. However, of course, with your organizations, you'll likely have far more than 2 emails that are being sent, but you also would see an open rate as a percentage. So in this case, no one's opened Larry's email yet. He doesn't have an open rate to calculate. The last icon that you're seeing in some of these rows would be our delete icon. And this is where that archive option comes into play. Now, with all of our emails, deleting that, you have the option to delete emails or archive emails. Now, let's take a look at archiving our February newsletter. We can go ahead and select the archive option. And now, when we look at our search results, we no longer have that February newsletter. We can include archived emailings. Go ahead, click that search button one more time. And here we have that archived newsletter. We also have the ability to unarchive the newsletter. And that'll bring it right back into its sort of active status where it appears in this list. And then, of course, we can delete our draft emails. And it just gives you a prompt at the very top asking if you're sure that you want to delete it, and you can go ahead and delete that draft. So this is a listing of our search results, and everything that you see here is pretty self-explanatory. The only differences are with the behavior of some of the icons in the maintain column, depending on the email that you're looking at, whether it's an email that's been sent or whether it's a draft email. Now let's talk about some of the options that we're seeing at the very top of our screen. We're going to skip over adding and emailing. You're going to have to tune in for that one. But let's talk about setting up and configuring our module. We talked about archiving individual emails. So when we're archiving a mass amount of emails, we always like to say this with a little bit of a red flag on it. Whenever you are performing an action which affects multiple things on your website, you always want to be double sure that you're doing it with intention and that you're not doing it just to kind of poke around and see what it does. So mass archiving emails is going to just remove all of the emails from your view and put them in that archive status. Does it delete them permanently? No. But if you do it on accident and you'd like to unarchive all of those emails, you'll have to do it individually. So while there is a mass archive function, there is not a mass unarchive function. So take care when you do perform that action. Now, you also have the ability to say which category you'd like to archive emails for. And we're going to talk about categories in a moment. As you're familiar at ClubExpress, we love categories. So you're going to see them everywhere. And the archive end date. So let's say, I want all emails from guest passes that were sent prior to November of 2021 to be archived. I don't want to see those in my list. I don't want to have to sift through them when I'm looking for anything specific. The next option that you have would be categories. So again, like I said, with pretty much every module on ClubExpress, you're going to be creating categories. In this case, these categories are, for the most part, useful for you as administrators. If you are also adding emailing as an option on your menu, they'll be important for your end users as well. So let's talk about adding categories and talk about what it means to add emailing to the menu. So right away, we have a handful of categories that have been created. We have the name of the category. We have a viewable column. I'll come back to that in a second. We have a level column. This level column is only going to be visible if you're an organization with subgroups. If you do not have chapters, you will not see this level or this level column, excuse me. Now, if you are a Model 2 organization where your parent level club and your chapters have completely separate websites and your members log into their local club website as opposed to the top level website to manage their account and interact and register for events. And you can also stick around for some more subgroup tips at the end of our session today. Now, in the maintain column on the right-hand side, you'll notice that some of these have our edit and trash can icons and some of them don't. Once an email has been assigned to a category, you can no longer delete that category. You also cannot edit that category. So at the very bottom, we have a couple of categories that we can change still. We can change our display sequence. When we add a category, we're naming the category, deciding whether or not it is going to be allowed on the view email page, and if necessary, designating a subgroup to that particular category. So 2 things that we're going to talk about here. Allowing the email on the view email page. When you add emailing to the menu, it's not giving your members the ability to send emails to other members. That's not what that does. When you add emailing to the menu, and we're going to do that towards the end of our session today, when you add emailing to the menu, all you're doing is giving your members access to sent emails from a specific category, and they display in a line format, sort of very similar to news and articles or any one of those features where you're seeing a list of the emails. You can click on the email and view it as a new page, a new tab in your browser. So this is one of the ways that you can create sort of an archive of email newsletters or an archive of maybe tips and tricks newsletters that you send out, an archive of messages from the president. All you'd have to do is say, well, I would like my view emailings page to include maybe announcements as well as president's messages. And you can add as many different categories to the view emailings page as you'd like. You can have all of your categories of emails display on that page. Now, keep in mind that just because an entire category of emails is being shown on that page, it does not mean that every email has to be shown. You'll see in a couple of weeks that you do have the option to remove certain emails from the list of emails showing on that list. Now we'll go back into our add category option and we'll take a look at what this belongs to field means. This belongs to field, of course, pairs with our level field. So this is going to be one of our subgroup tips, and we'll talk about this again towards the end of our session here. But when you're creating an emailing category, if you're doing this at the parent level of your organization, and of course, if you have chapters configured on your site, you have the ability to say that this category is just for this specific subgroup, just for this chapter, just for this region. So at the very bottom here, we have a category of Midwest announcements. And if I go ahead and edit that category, I can see that I'm not allowing it on my view email page, but I said it belongs to the Midwest region. So at a base level, what that means is that category is going to be visible when any administrator logs into their site. Any administrator for the Midwest region logs in and goes to craft an email. They're going to see the category of Midwest announcements, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So now that we've talked about categories, we're going to take a very brief revisit to categories when we talk about subgroups, but let's go ahead and move on and talk about some of the other features within emailing. So we've looked at mass archiving emails and setting up categories. We are going to skip over templates, and we're going to talk about those in our next webinar. Let's talk about saved distribution lists. Now, with saved distribution lists, you're really creating a distribution list from several other distribution lists that we've created for you. You can do this from the screen that I've taken you to. You can even do it in the email that you're actually crafting when you're crafting the email itself. Now, if I go ahead and add a distribution list, I'm seeing a window that includes a drop-down menu. Now, this drop-down menu includes, as I said, several dozen different distribution lists. But you're not limited to just using one of these individual lists. You can use as many as you need to build the list as you see fit. On the right, in addition to the drop-down menu, we have these add and exclude buttons, and then, of course, the ability to name the distribution list at the very bottom. So let's talk about what we have here. First of all, if you haven't noticed, as I keep hovering over this drop-down, I see a little tooltip that tells me I can actually type in here and search for, I can type in and search for a specific word within my distribution list to find what I'm looking for. So it's super helpful because the distribution lists are not in alphabetical order. So it might be take a few seconds to find something, but if I know I'm looking for expired solo and primary members, I'm looking to get people to renew their membership, maybe introduce a few new features that we've added to our site, talk about some new events that we're planning on hosting in the next year. Now let's talk about some of the individual distribution lists that we have and what they might mean. At the very top, active solo and primary members, that's going to include anyone who's an individual member who's not part of a group membership, and primary members only within a group membership. Alternatively, you can email just secondary members. So only secondary members in a group membership, whether that's a household membership, a business membership, anything like that, all secondary members, no tertiary members, no primary members, and as many secondary members as there are in that membership. Next up, non-members in a specific district, chapter, district, or region. So every organization or most organizations have a listing of non-member contacts. So those non-member contacts can be assigned to a subgroup, and you may only want to send an email to those specific non-members, especially if what you're emailing about is a local issue. Everyone who volunteered for an opportunity. And this brings us to another feature of our distribution list builder. So if we select everyone who volunteered for an opportunity, well, what opportunity are we talking about? The good news is the system lets you tell it. So underneath that field, you now have an additional field, volunteering opportunity. And I go ahead and I choose the individual opportunity that I would like to email people about. So anyone who signed up as a volunteer for the harvest dinner, I'm going to add them to my distribution list. So now I can see that I have a set of people included in this particular distribution list, and I can remove that group if I've made a mistake. Some additional distribution lists. Everyone who hasn't responded to a specific survey. Oh boy. We'll try that again. Sorry, I hit the wrong key on my keyboard. So let's start from the top here. Anyone who has not responded to a survey, that's going to, again, give you that additional field where you're choosing what survey you're talking about. Members with a specific title, and you can include the title that would have been included in their contact information with that particular member. Everyone who ordered a specific product from the storefront, again, you're choosing that individual product. Members based on birth date. Respondents to a specific ad hoc form, you're going to be choosing the form. So we can kind of take a look at a lot of these, and you'll see that anytime you're including someone who did something specific or has a specific attribute applied to their membership, whether it's a member type, whether it's the fact that they have a specific interest or are part of a specific committee, they're always going to be invited to choose that specific item in the distribution list. So some other distribution list options that might be useful for membership directors, recent membership. So with recent membership, we can choose, well, how recent, 90 days, 10 days, do you want to, maybe you just had a really big membership drive and you had a ton of signups in the last week, and you want to send a very quick follow-up email to everyone to make sure that they're still, riding that wave of being freshly involved in your organization. Or you can reach out to people who have joined in the last 3 months just to poke them, just to see how they're doing. In addition to those, we're coming up on a couple of additional membership-based distribution lists. So anyone who is in their renewal cycle, so anyone who is in that renewal window where they might be getting notices, members that are expiring soon, members with a specific expiration date range. So maybe you have rolling renewals and you like to send out just refresher emails quarterly, just to remind everyone to look out for their reminder email, letting them know that their membership is expired, or just sign in and preemptively renew their membership. Now, let's talk about this all capital email distribution list. This is one that was added a few years ago now for a very specific reason. So if everyone remembers, a couple of years ago, we had a tiny pandemic. It's totally fine. But during that time period, a lot of clubs and organizations needed to urgently contact their members to let them know what was going on with club events, how things were being handled moving forward. And they were running into an issue that some members, as is their right, had opted out of emails. So we added an email distribution list that is for urgent and emergency purposes. So this is not a distribution list to abuse as a way to get around members having opted out of receiving emails from your organization. While we want to continue to respect member privacy, we also understood that, there were really urgent circumstances surrounding the creation of that particular distribution list. So please keep in mind that it is not a way to sneakily get around the option that members have to not receive emails from your organization. So next up, we again have a lot of membership-based distribution lists. So all members, including expired, just captures all active members, including those who are expired. Other membership status values. So if you're familiar with working in the People Manager and seeing all of the different status values that can be assigned to a membership, perhaps you want to send every pending member a friendly reminder that their membership is not complete until they actually go in and complete payment. They may not have, seen that sentence in their confirmation email. They might just need another reminder. You can email all of your trial members to say that, when their trial expires, maybe you want to send them a coupon code to say, save 25% off of your membership if you join before your trial membership ends. And then farther down, we can see some additional very specific distribution lists, members of a specific committee, members of a specific subgroup, anything having to do with a subgroup. Again, you're only going to see that distribution list if you're an organization with subgroups. You'll have the ability to send emails just to a specific subgroup, to everyone in the organization, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about sending our emails, we're going to talk about the ways that you can send them. And again, we're going to revisit some of those subgroup options in just a moment. So if I say, for example, active members of a specific subgroup, we see that very familiar subgroup selector where I'm choosing, let's say I only want to email the folks that are from Chicago Metro. I can go ahead and add that to my list. Now, we've been talking about these distribution lists and everything that we can do with our distribution list, but we also have this exclude option. So in addition to being able to say, well, I want everyone from Chicago Metro, and I also want everyone for annual conference planning because we're going to be planning a conference in Chicago. But I actually don't want to include a couple of people in this email. Maybe a couple of people that are on the conference planning committee have removed themselves from the planning process. Maybe they just know that they're stretched too thin. They don't have the bandwidth, and we're not going to include them in this Chicago conference distribution list. So I can say that I want to exclude. Let me go ahead and exclude a member, a specific member. Let me go ahead and try and find. I'm not finding the specific distribution list. In the interest of time, I'm going to just demonstrate it without one. So the ability to exclude individual members or individual groups from your distribution list. So let's say that I decided I want to exclude individual people or exclude individual areas. All I have to do is select the exclude button, and we can go ahead and choose as many individual groups as we need. So there isn't a limit to the number of groups you can include and groups that you can exclude. Couple of additional points on this. I'll go ahead and name this as my Chicago conference list. And each person who's part of these groups is only going to get this email once. So if you have someone who happens to be part of the Chicago subgroup and also is part of the conference planning committee, they're only going to get that email one time. And now we have our Chicago conference list. I can go back and edit that distribution list at any time. I can also delete the distribution list. I can add to it. I can remove groups from it at any point. We'll go back into email. Sorry, one more point about our distribution list, and then I'll nix the distribution list for you. When we are talking about our distribution list and we're talking about building these lists are dynamically built every time the email is being sent. So just because I'm creating this distribution list now, and I may not be sending an email to this committee for another 2 weeks, that doesn't mean that the email distribution list stopped collecting people today. The email distribution list doesn't actually get compiled until the email is sent. So it's going to include people who have literally joined that committee up until that day. Now let's talk about our emailing options. So with emailing options, there are just a handful of features, and like with a lot of our other modules, these aren't hard and fast options. These are more defaults. So let's talk about our from email address and name. Your from email address and name is just what's going to be displayed for people who are receiving your email in their inbox. Your from email address and name, if you don't specify it here, is going to always default to whoever is filling out that email. But I can input a from email address and a from name, and I can compile the email and I can log in, and I can always back it out if I don't want that email address and name to appear for every single email. I can choose to always track opens, always include social networking links at the bottom of my email. That's just a best practice, really, to drive people to your social pages, get them to engage with each other just a little bit more. To always show system templates. So system templates are templates that we've created for you, as opposed to templates that you've created yourself. How many days back do you want members to be able to view those emails on that viewing emailing page? We're saying that this is going to go back a full year. And for starting and ending and your time increments when you're scheduling emails, what do you want those time increments to be? Now, let's go back and talk about a couple of other additional things. We're going to go back into emailing administration, we're going to go back into our control panel. And we've been talking about putting emailing on the menu. So let's take a look at what that's going to look like. I am going to go into my website tab, select our menu option from the setup section, and on my member menu, which is the menu I'm looking at now because I'm signed in as a member, I'm going to just add emailing as an additional option at the very end. I'm not going to worry about adding it to a submenu. And of course, like magic, here's our emailing feature. I'll go ahead and select this, and we can see, like I promised, in a very news and article style fashion, you have a listing of the emails that you've sent. So right here, we're showing our announcements category. I can go ahead and select our November newsletter. I can see when it was sent. So I have a personal frame of reference for this, and I can scroll down and just view the email as it was sent, return to previous page, and continue about my day. And of course, with each category that you've added, you'll have a new header with a new listing of emails, and they'll all appear in this really nice card format here. And if I select this edit option, which I have the ability to do as an administrator, I'm right back at emailing administration. So let's take a look at what we've talked about so far. So we've talked about access, setting up those emailing coordinators. We've talked about our emailing administration, what we can do with the emails that we've sent, with the emails that we've drafted, set up our module. We've kind of talked about emailing with subgroups, but let's actually take a better look at emailing with subgroups and talk about, we'll revisit the things that we touched on, and we'll get into a little bit more detail here. So with emailing for subgroups, we're really talking about two different organizations, or two different types of organizations. So when you're emailing with subgroups, we're talking about either Model 1 or Model 2 organizations. A Model 1 organization is an organization where you have one website, chapters are listed on the main website, and members sign in at the parent level in order to manage their profile, sign up for events, sign up for discussion forums, and so on. In addition to that, we have Model 2 organizations. Model 2 organizations is where everyone has their own website. All of your chapters have their own website, and the parent level has its own website as well. Members in the case of Model 2 organizations will also sign into the local chapter website in order to manage their membership, participate in forums, register for events, and things like that. Now, with a Model 1 organization where you have one website, that's actually the way our Northwest Balloon Club is set up. So if we take a look at our Northwest Balloon Club one more time. If we take a look at our Northwest Balloon Club is set up as a Model 1 organization where everyone is signing into the same site, which is why we had to add Larry Cho as a coordinator for an individual subgroup to demonstrate our next section. Now, we talked about adding, we'll go back into our communications tab, we talked about adding coordinators to emailing. But what about for individual subgroups? So for individual subgroups, when we go back into our club tab and we have our organization data, this screen should look pretty familiar to you. This is how you would manage your individual chapters, and it's also how you manage chapter level administrators. If I click on the Midwest region, and I select administrators because remember, we have someone who's managing the Midwest region. We want them to be able to manage their own members. We want them to be able to send out emails and do all of the things that we can do as parent level administrators, but just for their region. So we've named Lucky Larry Cho as the administrator for the Midwest region. Now, you'll also recall that back on our emailing screen, we also designated a specific category to be available just to the Midwest region. We called it Midwest Announcements. Now, when Larry signs in to Northwest Balloon Club, he's going to be able to see just his version of the control panel. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as a different user, and I'm going to go ahead and sign in as Larry Cho. Hopefully I'll be able to sign in as Larry Cho. Let me go ahead and...
Sam, you might need to retype in the address when you've logged out as an administrator, because it'll be trying to take you to the control panel and you can't get there because you're not.
Well, in the event that anyone else ever has this problem, you just heard how to fix it. So we'll go ahead and sign in as Larry. When Larry goes into the control panel, he is only viewing the communications tab and only taking a look at emailing. When I select emailing and I select add emailing, and this is giving you just a very slight preview of what we've seen before, and I'm editing the basics of my email, I only have the ability to categorize this as Midwest Announcements. And then, of course, when I'm emailing anyone, I'm only emailing folks within my organization, and I don't have access to any emails that anyone else outside my region has sent. So Larry can only see the emails that he sent or any other administrators in his region. He's not going to be able to see or edit or change any of the emails that Martin Smith has been able to. Now, conversely, Martin Smith, parent level administrator, is actually able to see all of the emails that all of the emails that Larry Cho has created. Now, in addition to Model 1 clubs, we also have Model 2 organizations. With Model 2 organizations, again, you have separate websites for everyone. Now, with Model 2 organizations, administrators can only email their subgroup, just like in the case with Larry Cho, even though they're technically two different models. Regional administrators are always only going to be able to reach out to other folks within their region. Under Model 1, of course, administrators can email everyone. Under Model 2 organizations, parent-level administrators do have the ability to email everyone within their subgroup, and everyone within additional subgroups. However, it's with one extra step as opposed to just being able to email everyone by default. So if we go ahead and switch gears here, I'm going to add an additional site to our demo package here. So I'm taking a look at our Illinois Association of Finance. Our Illinois Association of Finance is set up as what we would call a Model 2 organization, where at the top level, we have Illinois, and then we have individual local finance associations that all have their own websites. So when Martin Smith, who is the administrator for the Illinois Association of Finance, goes into our emailing option, and let's say even configures a distribution list, we're seeing a bunch of distribution lists here, but we're also seeing active members of a specific subgroup. So when you're talking about emailing from a parent level and you're emailing individual subgroups as opposed to members who have joined at the parent level, so members who don't necessarily belong to a subgroup, you're going to want to select those individual subgroups and start building your individual list. So for example, if I wanted to email everyone who is just a member of the Illinois Association of Finance, or if I'd want to email just everyone who's a member of the Chicago Association of Financial Planners. And of course, if I add additional cities as additional subgroups, I can add and continue to add individual subgroups to build my list. So under Model 1, we talked about setting up those categories. We've talked about setting up region, district, or chapter administrators, and that subgroup administrators can only email their subgroup, but full level administrators can email everyone really easily. Under Model 2, administrators can only email their subgroup, just as with the Model 1 organizations. And parent level administrators can email all subgroups, but they'll end up selecting those individual subgroups. And there is not a parent level setup that's required. So when you're taking a look at, setting up a coordinator, setting up another administrator, sure, you may want to set up emailing coordinators, but you won't need to configure any subgroup administrators when you're a Model 2 organization. And the last thing that we'll talk about very briefly today, and for this, we actually will switch to an additional demo site. We want to talk about our bad emails. So within the communications tab, we have a section in our admin functions called bad emails. With bad emails, you get to see a full list of every problematic email address within your database. Now, these emails are problematic for a number of reasons. At the very top, we have a glossary that helps you define the problems that we've listed: bad format, invalid address, blocked, or temporary failure. So when you're taking a look at all of the individual problems, you can find a definition for that problem at the top of your screen. And on the right-hand side, so you'll see that each line item includes an error message that may have been received. It also includes the email address as it's been listed. This is, of course, a demo club. So we have a lot of what I call dirty data being included in our list here. On the right-hand side, we have the option to manage those bad emails. So when we're taking a look at individual email addresses, we can change them, reactivate them, or completely ignore the errors. Now, in a webinar maybe about a month ago, we actually went through a lot of our data cleanup tools that are available in the People Manager. So hopefully your bad email address list doesn't look like this. But if it does, you might want to go visit our YouTube channel, take a look at our recent webinars and look for that which discusses our data cleanup tools. And maybe take a look at some of the information that's included in your database, clean up some of those email addresses, and just remove some of those errors. And as a final bonus, we'll take a very, very quick trip into our event widget, our event module. And I want to point out that within the events module, we'll go ahead and we're only going to open up a pre-configured event. I don't actually need to create a new event for this. I just want to show where that option sits in all events that you have access to. When I take a look at an event or when I'm configuring an additional event, let me go back into a full event and not a quick event. So when we're taking a look at a single activity event, and we have all of our familiar icons at the very top here, Under emailings, we're going to see a really familiar screen within the events page. Looks just like emailing. It is just like emailing with a couple of very important caveats. The first being any email that you send from the events widget, or excuse me, from the events module, is only going to live in the events module. If I send an email about this event, that email isn't going to duplicate itself in my emailing module. I'm only going to be able to see that email when I come back to the event. So if you feel like you sent an email about an event and you're not finding it in emailings, you probably sent it from within the event itself. Don't panic. Just take a look at the event emailing option. And when we're talking about distribution lists, and we're taking a look at emailing distribution lists, we have a lot of additional grouped distribution lists that we've created that are specific to the event itself. Anyone who is not registered that's part of a specific committee, anyone who's registered but hasn't paid. So keep in mind that you have additional distribution lists that are available to you within the event itself. And also keep in mind, if we have any aging in place villages on our webinar today, hi, how are you? If you are sitting in on our webinar today, thank you and welcome. You also have a lot of individual distribution list options that are specific to your needs and to your club data for aging in place villages. And you'll be able to see all of those distribution list options in the same list. You'll just see additional ones again if you're configured as an aging in place village. I didn't think that I could talk an hour about emailing administration, but here we are. Devin, how are we doing on questions?
We're doing great. We had a pretty lively chat, especially the middle section. Some of the questions are things that we will be addressing in our next webinar on events, and some of them were things that I was able to answer. Some that I just wanted to make sure that we got on the recording. Some people had questions if we report on like click rate on certain links within the report or within the email itself. We only track the opens. We don't track like what links or what images that people click on within the email itself. Something someone did ask was, how can you send attachments the old-fashioned way, as in like attaching it to the email so that the email actually goes out with the file attached instead of a link in the email? There's a very important reason, and it's related to, a question that we get pretty often is how do we avoid spam lists, and like how do we avoid getting our emails, caught in spam filters. And so that's one of the reasons that we don't allow for like attaching a document to blast emailings, because a lot of times, all of us who have an email address here know, don't click on strange links. A lot of providers like Gmail and Outlook and Hotmail and all of those different email providers, they will a lot of times automatically block an email if it is sent in a bulk blast format with file attachments. So that's one of the reasons we don't allow for direct file attachments, and we use just the link kind of style for attaching a document. Someone did ask, is there a way when you're doing that, is there a way to not require members to log in order to view it? And that is a yes. You can set up that document in your document library to be a public document. If it's visible, to the public to access, then it won't require a member to log in. When they click on it, it'll just start the download. If it is a members only document, we do have to require login, because that's the only way we can ensure that someone is actually a member in order to access that document. Some people might say, oh, but they got the email, so then they're a member. But if they were to forward that email to someone, then theoretically that person could not be a member and have access to that document. So that's why we have to require a login in order to get to it. And then one other question we got was, can members see past event emails? So we do have that screen where people can see emails that have been sent in the past, but is there a way to include event emails on that screen? And that's one question I will defer to you, Sam. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
I am also not 100% sure on that, but we can certainly figure that out and tune in next week for the answer to that. We'll make a note of that, and we'll include the answer in next week's webinar as a definitive.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. And just to let people know, like I am hearing you, we're going to talk to, there seems to be an issue with the automatic resend option to send, send this email 3 days after to the people who didn't open it. It sounds like there might be a bug going on there. So I will talk to our developers about that and see if we can't get that fixed as soon as possible. But I think unless someone else pipes up here, I think that's about all the questions we had that needed to be taken out in the open.
All right. Well, this one was chock full of information. And in 2 weeks, when everyone has digested all of their turkey, we will be coming back with an additional webinar that is going to cover creating an email, creating templates, and we're going to go through more of the aesthetic options within emailing. And then, of course, we'll see how the options that we've set up and anything that you would have configured as far as administration, how that affects the emails that you set up in the future. So thank you again for joining us. We appreciate your time and we appreciate all of your questions and suggestions. We will end this webinar right on time, 2 minutes late, and we'll see you all in the next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.